So this video was incredibly difficult to make because there's just so much to talk about when it comes to the Romantic period of music. Usually when I make these videos, I start off by making a list of all the composers I want to talk about, but when I finished that list for this video, it was about 2 pages long, so I'm gonna have to cut back, which makes me sad, and it's probably gonna make you sad, but you know what, we'll get through this together. Also, I'll still be putting that guided listening down below, so click on that if you are interested. So, as I finished with last week's video, Beethoven and Schubert really pushed the boundaries of classical music by introducing new harmonies and also a more emotional tone to their music. This starts a major trend of emotionally charged music that erupts out of Germany. This becomes the Romantic period of music. Now, one of the big things that any musicologist has to do when they're researching music is find out what social changes and trends caused that impact on music. The 2 biggest factors involved in the Romantic period's evolution were the Industrial Revolution and a growing sense of nationalism among most Europeans. The Industrial Revolution, which you might be like, how does that impact music? Was actually very important because what happened is a lot of people who used to be working in the fields and out in the country now are moving into cities and working in factories. And because city life can sometimes be something of a drag, especially, before a lot of modern conveniences that we have today, people began to romanticize the connection that they had with nature, a fascination with supernatural forces, and even a new inspiration from the Orient. And then nationalism is a feeling of unity between people from the same area or of the same ethnic group. So instead of organizing this video, as I have with the past few videos, by mini era of music, I'm instead going to organize this by country. And since all Romantic music really started in Germany, let's start there, shall we? And just FYI, all these composers I'm listing are in order of birth. Some of the most famous German Romantic composers were Karl Maria von Weber, one of the first Romantic opera composers, and he was also a conductor, pianist, and even guitarist. Fanny and Felix Mendelssohn, a brother and sister who both composed and were individually in their own right fantastic pianists. Robert Schumann, primarily a composer of German art song, but also a very good composer of piano works. Richard Wagner, arguably the most impactful composer of the Romantic era. He wrote operas on a massive scale. I mean, his opera cycle, the Ring Cycle, which is 4 operas, lasts 16 hours and usually is performed over 4 days. Clara Schumann, Robert's wife, who was also the daughter of his composition and piano teacher. She was also an extremely talented composer and pianist, and after Robert got sent to an insane asylum, she was able to support her family based on all of her income just by her own performance schedule. Johannes Brahms, a composer of many genres who was very close to Clara Schumann, and actually it's a rumor that after Robert was committed, Clara and Johannes had like a little thing. And Richard Strauss. We are currently listening to his song Beim Schlafengehen, and if you want to learn more about Richard Strauss, I actually made an entire video about him, which you can get to right here. I'll give you a little bit to click on that. Are you ready? Alright, moving on! From the Germans, let's move on to the Italians. Italians of the Romantic period were primarily opera composers. The big names are Giacomo Rossini. Rossini wrote The Barber of Seville, which is one of the most commonly performed operas all around the world. Gaetano Donizetti, known for his operas Les Yeux d'Amour and Lucia di Lammermoor, which has one of the craziest mad scenes ever written. Vincenzo Bellini, whose famous works include Norma and La Sonnambula. Giuseppe Verdi. Basically all of his operas are still performed today, and actually his piece Va Pensiero from Nabucco was the rallying cry for the nationalistic movement in Italy when they were trying to make Italy one country. And last but not least, Giacomo Puccini, who wrote the infamous La Bohème, as well as Tosca, Turandot, and Madama Butterfly. We've been listening to the famous aria Mi chiamano Mimi from La Bohème. Leaving opera behind, we go to France. The French, like the Germans, saw flowering of all genres. First, we have Hector Berlioz, who wrote the first programmatic symphony, or basically a symphony that's designed to tell a story. Charles Gounod, known for his operas Romeo and Juliet and Faust. Jacques Offenbach, also an opera composer, but he also wrote operettas, which are light operas that usually have some spoken text. Camille Saint-Saëns, known for his opera Samson et Dalila and also his beautiful symphonic works. Léo Delibes, who was the first composer in an extremely long time to just dedicate himself only to ballets. Georges Bizet, who died at a very young age and actually passed away before his opera Carmen became the huge success that it is known as today. Gabriel Fauré, known for his French art songs, chamber music, and his Requiem. And Ernst Chausson, also a song composer who wrote one of my favorite French chansons, Le Colibri, which we have been listening to me sing. Ha ha ha! I'm singing in this video! Okay, from here sections aren't so big, so let's move on to Russia. The Romantic period in Russia was characterized by 5 composers known as the Five or the Mighty Handful. The group was led by Mili Balakriev and included such composers as César Sully, Modest Mussorgsky, Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, and Alexander Borodin. This group basically got together to try and create an authentically Russian style of music. This was evidence of that nationalistic thing that I mentioned earlier. The other big Russian composer from the Romantic period is Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky wasn't known for pushing boundaries, but his ballets, The Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and Sleeping Beauty are some of the most famous and most often performed ballets to this date. Also, a shout out to Sergei Rachmaninoff, who is kind of an in-between romantic and post-romantic composer, and I don't really feel comfortable labeling him as only a romantic composer, but he's awesome and look him up. Next, we'll discuss 2 Czechs. Antonin Dvorak, who wrote the beautiful New World Symphony and was also something of a musicologist himself. Dvorak would go around and collect folk music from Moravia and from Bohemia and use it in his music. And Leos Janáček, who wrote operas and symphonic works. I actually had the opportunity to perform in his opera The Cunning Little Vixen my freshman year of college. Good times. From Czech we move to Poland, where we get to the fantabulous Frédéric Chopin. Chopin's piano music is some of my absolute favorite, and it has this great way of drawing you in and not letting you go. We've been listening to the first movement of his second piano sonata, which always gives me chills. Finally, it wouldn't be the Romantic period without Hungarian Franz Liszt. Liszt was the rock star of his day, and he would travel around all of Europe performing pieces that he wrote for himself and that were so difficult that nobody else could play them. He also started that mildly annoying trend of memorizing every piece of instrumental music that you perform. Musicians everywhere, thank you! Whew, okay, so that's all for this week. I know that this was basically just a blizzard of names, but that's kind of what the Romantic period was. It was just an explosion of so many amazing composers and musicians. This was the second to last video of my brief guide to music history. It seems bittersweet. I know I've had a really good time making this guide, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed it and have learned something. If you have, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, and share with someone that you think would really enjoy learning a little bit more about music history. Until next week, when we get to the 20th century. Ciao! Musicology.